Hi, I'm Dr. Katie, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Crazy. First time I've ever said that. Well, not really, because I had a lot of re-records. But it's crazy to say that because this is my very first YouTube video. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here. You might recognize me from Instagram. Maybe. I'm not that big. At Lil Medicine Gal. I started at Lil Medicine Gal in 2018 when I was a pre-med, and it's kind of tracked my time as a junior in college up until now graduating medical school. I have recently just rebranded, had a big name change. It's now Hey Dr. Katie, just like my YouTube channel. But if you want a little bit more information and my insights, feel free to check me out there. But I decided to not switch, but add on some YouTube. I decided to add on YouTube for a little bit more long form content. That's something that I really love watching, and so I thought that maybe I could have a stab at making it. So I was thinking about what my favorite YouTube videos were to watch when I was at pre-med and when I was in med school. And I loved watching people's paths to medicine. I think it's because I was deeply insecure and I wanted to compare myself. So if that's you, peace and love, we'll get through it, you'll get there. Anyways, I always liked watching paths to medical school, and I am a low stat applicant. I got into med school off of low stats, so I would love to share those and talk about how I got into med school in this video. So let's get started. My parents are both in medicine. So my mom's an RN and my dad is a firefighter. And I grew up with that medical influence. My mom, she was always going to neighbors' homes. She was always helping out. I learned how to do a French braid to close up our little a head lack for our little neighbor so she didn't have to go to the emergency room in the middle of the night and get staples, and actually healed well. And my dad is a firefighter and a hero for a lot of different reasons that maybe I'll talk about in later YouTube videos. I'd love to have him on. But our family legend, everybody talks about it. When I was 2, so I actually get to say that I was there. We were driving home from a road trip, and he saw a car overturned in a lake, and he stopped our car and dove in and saved a man, performed CPR, brought him back to life. So that's how I was raised. I was raised around medicine and the careers of medicine. I also watched Scrubs. This is what I love to say. Binge the whole Scrubs during a spring break in high school. And I know it's a TV show, but you'll hear a lot of medical professionals say it's maybe one of the most accurate of medical education. But JD and Elliot and Dr. Cox just have these really big hearts and also these really big brains that helped impact the lives of the patients around them. And I remember watching that and being like, oh yeah, that's for me. So medicine has always been in the back of my mind. I know there's a huge part of me that just didn't believe that I could do it. I was always a B average student in high school. I mean, in undergrad, I'll share my GPA. It's not the best. It's definitely within average. But I did it. I made it. And I look back and it's because I was a really hard worker. Okay, sorry, I'm getting out of whack. Anyway, so I went to college as an international relations major. I switched quickly to nursing. I actually had a lot of majors in college, and I actually went to a lot of colleges. So I did international relations, I did nursing, I did psychology, I did philosophy, and then I finally landed at molecular biology. So why so many majors? And then I went to 3 undergrads before I went to CU, which is where I ended up graduating from. And a lot of it, I think about this often, and I talk about it in therapy, but I was raised LDS or Mormon, and a big part of the Mormon community or Mormon teaching, LDS teaching, specifically surrounding women, is that the best and most important thing you can do as a woman is be a wife and a mother. So that was kind of the messaging that I had growing up. I also had a handful of mentors and leaders who wanted, actually, it was a lot, shockingly, who wanted to become doctors and ended up becoming nurses because they wanted to be able to stay home for their kids. And then later in times they went on and later on when their kids had graduated or moved on, they went on and got their doctorate in nursing. And that is what I thought was my only option. I didn't really believe that I could have a demanding career as a woman and still attract a mate. So I started at BYU, Idaho, and then I transferred to Utah Valley University. So I actually never admitted that I wanted to be a physician like very rarely. Didn't really admit it to myself. I didn't really believe that I could, number one, because I felt like I was average, but then also because I didn't really feel like I could be a good wife and a mother, which is something like I still really wanted to do. Then I eventually left the church and like really started living my full truth. That's where we are today. But it's funny, for a little bit I like still had this belief that nobody would love me. And like I lived my whole life thinking that being married was like the most important thing that I could do. So finding somebody to love me was really important. And it's funny, I went on a few dates with a few guys in the BYU, Idaho area, as well as like the Provo area. And the few times that I did admit that I wanted to be a physician, I like every time they're like, well, quote, why don't you want to be a nurse or like a teacher so you can still be a good mom? So that's what I was up against. Anyways, like I said, I left, deconstructed. I feel like I can put I can make a whole video on my deconstruction, and I probably won't, because it's something that's like still kind of sacred to me. I have friends and family who are still in the church, so I'm not really going to go deep into it. But I only bring that up because that's how it's shaped. Like that's shaped my pre-med experience, because I wasn't pre-med for so long. So I left the church, left the state of Utah, came back home to Colorado and went to my state school. I got my degree in molecular cellular developmental biology, and I said out loud, I want to be a doctor. And it was just like, oh, it's like crazy. Whatever cosmic influence, God, the universe, karma, like if you believe in fate, that we have these like paths set out before us. I feel like once I like decided that I wanted to be in medicine and I wanted to get my degree in molecular biology, like my path was so easy. It wasn't an easy path, but it was like an easy decision, and it was just like so now that we got that out of the way, I feel like we can talk about pre-med prereqs. So if you are interested in going to medical school, you have to finish your prereqs. I was really lucky. MCDB had a lot of crossover, so there wasn't a lot that I had to take outside of my major. So the med school prereqs are, I think it's 2 years, 4 semesters of a biology, 2 semesters of Gen Chem, 2 semesters of organic chemistry, 2 semesters of physics, a semester of biochem, optional anatomy and physiology. Oh, it's been so long. I should probably look this up, but I'm not going to. The only class that I didn't take as a part of my major was Introduction to Anatomy and Physiology. And like I said, that was optional. That just kind of helped me with the MCAT. Otherwise, everything I took from my major worked for med school. So it was great. Of those classes, obviously I loved my molecular biology classes. That was like where my love, I love cell bio, I love kinesin, I love my little macromolecules, the Golgi apparatus. I know too much about that than like any normal person should, but I loved it. My least favorite class was definitely physics. I really struggled with physics. In fact, in physics 2, I got a C. Yeah, I got a C. I'm going to talk about my GPA a little bit later, but I got 2 C's in undergrad, and it was in the exact same semester, which was the spring semester of my senior year. I got a C in biochem, and I got a C in physics 2. And this is my first pearl of the video, if I haven't already shared like pearls. I had a anesthesiologist that I was shadowing at the time. He asked me what sound bad grades make. I said, what? And he said, they make the sound of doors closing on your future. So when I got those 2 C's, that voice was so strong in my head. And I thought I was going to have to completely redo those classes. I thought I would never get into med school. And I did. On like faith and a prayer, I made it. So C's aren't going to like absolutely destroy you. I did really have a good explanation for that semester. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but I was working full time to be able to pay for CU. So when I left BYU, my parents decided they weren't going to pay for my college anymore. I paid with student loans and working like 70 hours a week. I paid for CU. And so I was working night shift at that time, full time. And it was just brutal. Night shift's brutal. I should not have been doing that in undergrad. It was just like really hard to like mentally handle those 2 classes at the same time. And I was pretty lucky I even got out with C's. So I was able to explain that. I was able to explain like financial hardship. I had to work all the time. this is what happened. And obviously it worked out for me. While we're talking about struggles in pre-med, actually the year prior I was taking OChem 2 and I was failing. It was mid-semester, not necessarily for the same reasons, but I kind of had a teacher who didn't really teach me well first semester, and I breezed through. And then the next semester, I had a little bit of a harder teacher, and so the class was a lot harder. And I was past like the drop point, and we had just taken our second exam, and I got a D on it again. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to pass this class. So I ended up dropping the whole course, a W on my transcript. But then I retook it over the summer and an A. I like got 100% on like every single test. And so that's another thing too, is like sometimes it's not you. I mean, obviously take responsibility for everything you do, but sometimes it is the teacher. And I had a wonderful teacher over the summer and we learned it all really fast. I didn't have anything else to do except for that class and I excelled. So like a really good confirmation to me of, people talk a lot about failures, of like you learn the most from your failures. And that was really big for me, is because when I got that W and I dropped, I was like, I'm a failure. I suck. I'm bad at this. I'm never going to make it to med school. Excuse me, I'm going to adjust. But then I took it over the summer and I did really well. And it was like, okay, I can do this. Sometimes I just need information shown to me in different ways. Okay, so we talked about pre-med prereqs. Let's talk about pre-med extracurriculars. So like I mentioned, my big thing was that I was an ER tech. I got my EMT second semester of my second year. It was like a 6-week course, 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. It was really fast. But that opened up a ton of doors for me clinically. I would strongly recommend getting your EMT. I think working on an ambulance or working in the emergency room is a little bit different of a workplace as a CNA or like a patient care tech. But I always had the option to do both. So like my EMT would transfer. I could work as a CNA or as a PCT if I wanted to. So I did that my last 2 years of college. Before that, I worked as patient transport to get my foot through the door. So I actually really love this job. I would literally just take patients from like their hospital rooms to imaging or other hospital rooms. And I had no other responsibilities. So it was kind of fun to just get to like talk to patients. And there's so many stories that I remember so vividly that they told me. So, anyways, so being an EMT was my main job. Like I said, I worked full time. They were 3 12-hour shifts. I normally worked like 1 p.m. to 1 a.m., which I actually really liked because I'd get home around like 2. I'd be able to go to bed and like wake up at like a decent time and still get some good sleep and still like participate in my classes and have a social life. And then, like I said, my last semester of my senior year, there's like one class I couldn't take. So I ended up switching to the night shift. It was just a disaster. I got paid a lot more on the night shift, but it suffered. Like I said, I got 2 C's. Not that that's an excuse, but an explanation. Okay, my next big experience as I worked as a TA. This was also a paid job, so I got paid for this. Most things I did, I got paid for because obviously I was paying for everything myself, so this was really important to me. So I was a TA. I TA'd for 2 classes in MCDB. They were both like lab research classes. It was really cool. I learned my passion in teaching around the same time. I was also a paid tutor for the CU athletic department where I like tutored athletes. Athletes got free tutoring and I tutored them. So those are my jobs. For research, I had 2 labs that I worked in. The first one was with Dr. Leslie Nicewander. She did developmental biology, so we looked at neural tube defects. I love that. And then I had an education. I was part of an education research lab, so we looked at how actually clinical experiences either helped applicants to med school or grad school or hurt applicants to med school or grad school, kind of like how their past lives impacted how successful they were in getting to med school or grad school. I actually presented this research at the American Society of Cell Biology, ASCB, in San Diego, which was really cool. So that was like my big research experience. And then after I graduated and after I quit my job as an EMT, I started working in a research lab studying mRNA kinetics. It wasn't really my thing. I actually ended up leaving that job to work as a medical assistant for a pediatrics office a year and a half while I was applying to med school. And then I eventually got into med school and retired out of that job. Okay, so volunteering. I volunteered at Children's Hospital. I started on like their cardiac floor, so I would like hold babies who just had heart surgery or like take care of the playroom and like bring toys to sick kids. And then I worked just kind of as like a floating volunteer. So at Children's Hospital Colorado, they have a lot of like guests come, so princesses, football players, stuff like that. So I would walk around with them and like escort them. So that was really fun. And then the biggest and most important volunteer experience that I had is I was a home health aide for a woman who had MS with pretty significant paraplegia. I did this for like all my years of undergrad, and I love this woman. I'm still very close to her. I consider her a very good friend of mine. So I will not talk about that experience too much for respect of her privacy, but that was a huge part of my med school application. The only other like miscellaneous experience I had is that I was a health volunteer for a week long backpacking trip with my former church. If you know what I'm talking about, you'll know what I'm talking about. That was pretty fun. I worked with a lot of doctors who were on that trip, and that helped me get shadowing. So this is a really nice transition into my like applying to medical school stage. I do want to talk about stats. I remember when I was a pre-med, I was like anxiously always looking for stats to compare myself to. Like I said, I was super self-conscious. I was on Reddit, I was on Student Doctor Network. I was like, will I get into med school with these stats? I was always looking for people who had like succeeded with similar stats. And so I want to say again, if that's you, oh, all love. I'm so sorry you're going through that. You are enough. You can do it. You also, if you feel like your stats are low, I feel like you can make up for them with really good clinical experience and research. And that's what I did. Again, I applied to med school 5 years ago. So I'm not quite sure where my stats like if things have gotten like way more competitive. Okay, so here we go. My GPA was a 3.5 and my science GPA was a 3.4, definitely on the lower end for applying to med school. And then my MCAT was a 505, which is like 65th percentile, or at least it was when I applied. I took my MCAT January of 2020. I applied to med school in June of 2020. So I thought about retaking it, but it was over 500 and I knew I wanted to go to DO school and I felt like that was enough. Another thing to remember is this was in the middle of COVID. Yeah, this was in smack dab in the middle of COVID. So there's a lot of like MCATs getting canceled. And so I believe my university actually did not consider the MCAT as much as they would have in past times. Like I even had a classmate who straight up didn't take the MCAT because it kept getting canceled and she was still able to start. So keep that in mind. 505, I probably could have done better, but that's a video for another time. So like I said, the strengths of my application was definitely my extracurriculars. I had like over 3,000, 4,000 clinical hours. I had over, sorry, I'm looking, like over 2,000 research hours. I'm not exactly sure my volunteer hours, but I definitely had like longer relationships in volunteering. That's something that I would really recommend if you are at the point where you're getting started, even like applying to residency as well. Find something that you're passionate in early and then just like volunteer with them for like 4 years. That just like shows that you're like dedicated. You're not just doing like one-offs, stuff like that. So I applied to 20 DO schools and 5 MD schools. I got 4 interviews, but I only did 2 of them because I got an interview from Rocky Vista, which is my home school or like really close to my home. I wanted to stay local. So as soon as I got that acceptance, I actually canceled and I did not take any more interviews. So briefly, I also really want to do another video for this. And I'm sorry I keep saying this, but when a lot of people ask me why DO and what's my experience been at a DO school. And I initially was introduced to the field of osteopathy or osteopathy. I just realized people are really opinionated on the way that you pronounce that. I like osteopathy. I don't know. But I was first introduced to that field by the DOs that I worked with in the emergency room, and one in particular who I shadowed. And she did do a little bit of OMM with a patient, osteopathic manipulative treatment, OMT. She did a little OMT on a patient with like rib pain and fixed him. Like he couldn't take a deep breath, but I obviously did like a lot of scans and stuff to make sure that he didn't have like life threatening things. It appeared like he had a rib out of place and she popped it back into place. and he was breathing fine, walked out. He was great. So I knew that I like kind of got introduced to it in that. And then when I was looking it up, the 4 tenets of osteopathy just like really resonated with me. It's that I need to look this up. I apologize. 4 tenets of osteopathy. The body is a unit. It's a whole consisting of mind, body, and spirit. Self-healing ability. The body has the inherent ability to heal itself and maintain health. Interrelationship of structure and function. The structure, bones and muscles, and function, movement, and organ systems of the body are interconnected and interdependent. Rational treatment. This is the big one for me. Treatment should be based on an understanding that these tenets are aimed at restoring the body's natural ability to heal. I love that. I'm not like super homeopathic, but I like have a little woo-woo in me that like I do believe bodies are capable of self-healing, and it's my job as like a physician to help get them there. Not all ailments, not all bodies are able to do this. I feel like if you start with that, that's the right way to start. So I knew DOs, and then I looked up the tenets and I was like, okay, I love osteopathic medicine. Okay, so yeah, so I think that's it. I applied 25 programs, got interviews at 4, got 2, got accepted into 2, ended up going with my home program, and that brings me to when I started medical school. Thank you so much for popping in and saying hi on this channel. If you came from Instagram, I love you forever. If you are brand new here, love you forever. Don't forget to subscribe. I have a lot of really cool videos coming up. I'm really excited to share a little bit more about DO schools. I want to talk about OMT. Most pressing and importantly, I want to talk about my ERAS and match experience. So don't go away. If you are a pre-med in med school or just curious about this process, just know that you are doing something that very few people in the world will ever do. So just know that if someone hasn't told you yet today, I am proud of you. I hope you have a really good rest of your day, and I'll see you next week.